the combined US dollar revenues of companies in the LSPI is 9.7 billion.
Teaching AI to translate hundreds of spoken and written languages in real time. And welcome everyone to another episode of Slater Pod. Hello there.
Hey, Florian, how are you doing?
All okay. So today we're hosting a pure news show because we just released our flagship annual language service provider index, the LSPI. Yeah, that was a big release a couple of days before we were expecting it to launch, right? So nice. Congrats, Esther.
Thanks.
And we're recording this on a Thursday, so of course there's also momentous news on the global stage, and I feel personally it's a sad day for Europe. But we'll stay in our lane here and discuss relating the news relating to an industry that actually brings people together rather than divide them. So we'll stay in our lane here. And on the agenda today is the, as we said, the LSPI highlights. The Neural Space fundraise, a company called Neural Space raised a bunch of money. And then we're going to revisit Meta/Facebook's machine translation plans. There was a bit of a development yesterday with a major piece of content they published. But first, take it away, Esther. What's going on with all of the language service providers that are part of our extended 2022 language service provider index?
Yes, well, I think this would be a rather lengthy episode if we were to discuss all of them, because there are nearly 300 companies on the LSPI this year. So 295 companies on the launch on Wednesday. So our biggest ever, most extensive ever language service provider index. I think we had 200 LSPs in the final version last year from 2021. So we've added roughly 100, and I'm sure that we'll get more kind of as time goes on and people see the index, because it is of course dynamic. So if you haven't yet submitted figures or you'd like to, please do. But yeah, I'll share some stats. I'll try not to go overboard with the figures because it can get a bit figure heavy, I suppose. But yeah, we've got like 100 of the companies are new. Like I said, the 295 is made up of so 5 super agencies. And for anyone who wants sort of an explanation of what we mean by these different categories, because we've segmented the LSPs based on sort of revenue size. Do check out the article and a bit of a description that we give there. But we've got 5 super agencies at the very sort of top of the food chain there in terms of revenue, 55 leaders, which again was bigger than last year. And we had a few companies that had been challengers in last year's version kind of step up, grow to become leaders, which is always nice to see, whether that's organic or through acquisition. We had a total of 49 challengers. So fewer challengers than leaders at this point. And a whopping 186 boutiques. So yes, of course, the majority of the index is made up of smaller companies. That's the nature of the landscape out there. But yeah, really pleased. So thanks to everyone who has participated, and I hope that it's a useful tool and reference for everyone going forward. I'll share a little bit geographically as well, in case this is of interest. So we've got 139 companies from Europe, excluding the UK. So that's the biggest geographical region represented in the LSPI. We have another 33 from the UK. We have a total of 68 companies participating from North America, of which 58 from the US. We have a total of 20 companies from Asia and 35 from the rest of the world. And so it's a bit of a geographical snapshot.
I mean, it's probably broadly like representative. I'm tempted to say for the industry at large, right? Because Europe's very, it's probably even more fragmented than the US because of all, of course, many more countries, right?
The US LSPs are probably proportionally larger, as in the ones on the LSPI, than other countries. But it seems comparatively fewer of them than in Europe. Yes.
It's just interesting. The UK is probably for me a little bit the kind of outlier that there would be 33 from the UK. Maybe it's also because, we're publishing in English, and so there's just a lot of companies that know us in the UK. It's just, it's a monolingual, as it were, kind of country. I mean, obviously it's very multilingual in reality, but like in terms of the law, it's monolingual, but there's 33 LSPs, and then you got 20 from Asia, 35 from the rest of the world. I mean, that broadly kind of like the weight, I guess, that
Mm.
the language industry represents globally. So, and in terms of the revenue, right? We're pegging the overall size of the language industry at what, like 27 billion dollars roughly, I
Yeah.
guess, in 2021. So, what proportion of that is represented in our index now?
Well, see, that sounds like a simple question, but it's got a complex answer in my view, because a lot of the revenues of especially the smaller ones are going to be subcontracting.
Got
So
it.
we cannot say for sure, okay, this is, a third or a quarter of the market. But what I can say is that the combined US dollar revenues of companies in the LSPI is $9.7 billion.
Got it.
Um,
Yeah.
and across everybody, there was 22% growth. So we obviously asked people to submit the 2020 figures and 2021 figures. The companies that entered our list grew collectively 22% to 9.4 billion. So it's a lot, and a lot of growth, which we like.
Yeah, it's a lot of growth. It's a big portion. Obviously, the growth probably skewed a little bit by kind of M&A and other
For
activities, right?
sure.
So in
Yeah.
terms of pure organic, we're gonna tell you more when we release our 2022 language industry market report, which is probably going to be in a month or so from now. So we
Yeah.
have a lot more figures then. In terms of, are there a couple more stats you wanna give us here before we move on
Yeah.
to the next topic?
I can do, and please feel free to skip forward if you're heard enough of the stats. But yeah, so we've got inclusive of both M&A and organic growth, growth on a segment level. So we can break that out. So super agencies grew by 33% from 2020. Leaders grew 18% from 2020. Challengers by 14% and boutiques by 16%. So all double-digit growth there. And obviously you can refer back to last year's index to see what the figures were like there, but a marked improvement from last year's index as well, which obviously was quite impacted by COVID at that point.
It is a bit, though. It's a bit the bigger get bigger, like the bigger get bigger faster picture,
Yeah, I mean, I think
right?
that's normal. You've
Yeah.
got the sort of RWS acquisition of SDL in there to skew things heavily in favor of growth.
Good point.
Um, yeah, I mean, and there's a lot. Obviously, you could be caveating this data for ages, but
Could you? You could
that's why I'm
absolutely.
saying you've got like M&A. This is why I'm saying inclusive of M&A and organic growth. We could talk as well about currency fluctuations, which have an impact because obviously we're reporting all of this in dollars. But then, it gets a bit nitty gritty and, only people like me can kind of care about stuff like that, care about stuff like that. But I will share, maybe just to simplify it and round things off here, a profile of the average, in air quotes, average LSP. So we did a calculation of the mean revenue for an LSP on the LSPI, which was $32 million in 2021. So if you're a $32 million company, you're apparently the mean average. However, the median average, so the one sort of slap bang in the middle number, like what was that, like 148 or 147 or something on the list, is $4.6 million in size. So that's probably more representative of your typical LSP
Yeah,
out there.
a lot more.
And
Yeah.
new this year, we did ask people optionally if they would like to tell us the headcount, how many people they employed as of year end, and also disclose the top 3 sectors that they focus on as a business. I don't have any stats about the sectors, but I think we'll be digging a lot more into that when it comes to publishing the market report as well. But Of those companies that told us about their headcount, the average across the companies, across the LSPs, was 137 people. So if
There
you
you
have
go.
137 employees, you're also some form of typical LSP. There we go.
Good, good. Thanks for those highlights. And of course, anybody who's interested in a lot more of a deep dive, head over to the page. It's freely available. It's in a beautiful, like, kind of card format where you can flick through all of the individual cards, and it's a long list. So, yeah, great job. Let's move on to Neural Space, a company that just raised they raised 1.7 million in a seed round, and they were so kind to provide us with additional data that usually you don't get. And so let me just tell you a bit more about what the company does, although I actually want to get the CEO, Felix Laumann, on the podcast at some point. We should probably reach out to him because it's hard to describe. So they're one of the kind of a direct competitor of Hugging Face, which I'm still trying to understand exactly
Which
what
you
it is.
also don't know what they do. So
Exactly. So it's an
Okay.
AI. I mean, like basically, it's an open source, like an AI platform where open source community, and we're people build kind of models and data sets for NLP, for natural language processing. And Neural Space's USP, so kind of unique selling point, their really niche is low resource languages. And we're going to talk about low resource languages in a minute when we talk about Facebook. So their real kind of angle here is low resource languages. You can build your models. You can build all kinds of NLP applications, including MT. But Felix told us it's not really their core kind of use case or their core capability. So they're really focusing on people that want to build conversational AI, like chatbots and conversational AI on their platform. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Now we don't fully comprehensively cover natural language processing, but I think
Yeah.
it's so adjacent and relevant to what the language industry does that, from time to time we pick an interesting example, and Neural Space is definitely one of this. And they told us also their valuation and their ARR. So it's interesting that they raised at an $11 million valuation in the C round. So, they raised 1.7 at an $11 million valuation. Lead investor was Maris Capital, not sure how to pronounce that. Also, it's interesting that they're currently generating $100,000 ARR. What's ARR? That's annual recurring revenue, right? That's the metric that software companies are using because they're growing so quickly. So if you just measured it essentially on a kind of calendar year, it wouldn't tell the whole story. So, and also there's this recurring element where if you have a subscription business, you measure it like that: MRR, monthly recurring revenue, ARR. So quite early stage if you're looking at those revenues, but looks like they're growing quite quickly. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had an $11 million valuation in this early round. They have 19 people headquartered in your part of the world, in London. And yeah, interesting company. Go ahead, check out their website, check out our article. It was actually I connected them via Andrew Breitenkamp from that we had on the podcast. What was it, like 3 months ago? So,
Yep. Nice.
Anyway, so let's move on to another NLP story, which, well, and this is more in the translation space, but it's extended NLP. So Meta/Facebook, they published a post yesterday entitled "Teaching AI to Translate Hundreds of Spoken and Written Languages in Real Time." Okay, so not going to talk a lot about this, just kind of flagging it. We're probably going to run a story, but there is an interesting angle here. So what do? They have we've spoken about that whole kind of metaverse thing and
Yeah.
people talking potentially, like, that their vision of people living, or not living, like meeting in the metaverse. And I speak German, you speak English, and we don't actually notice because the engine behind
Like
translates kind of
neutralizing the language factor.
exactly. So that's the vision here. And obviously, Facebook's pouring billions and billions and billions into this metaverse, and language is kind of being swept up in this because if you have the language barrier, then there goes the metaverse, I guess. So they in that article they just published, they described two key initiatives, 2 new projects. The first one is called No Language Left Behind, and where they're building, quote unquote, new advanced AI model that can learn from languages with fewer examples to train from. They say like from Asturian to Luganda to Urgu. So going full low resource, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
the connection to the neural space race there.
Mm.
And the second one is they call it the universal speech translator. So they're designing novel approaches, they say, to translating from speech in one language into another one in real time. Because, okay, machine translation for low resource languages is one thing, but then if it doesn't work for speech, then obviously it breaks down as well there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they have this vision apparently of people meeting in the metaverse regardless of language. Speech to speech MT is a key to achieving this, and I think we're gonna just speech to speech MT is a very important research direction at the moment. And a
Yeah.
company like Meta, which despite the drop in shares, still have a ton of money pouring research time and funds into this is gonna accelerate development. They also highlighted that there's well-known challenges like from data scarcity to lack of human reviewers for rare language combo, etc. So I'm not going to go into too much of a detail there. That's just what the industry has been struggling for. What's the key challenge? If you don't have data, it's hard to do. If you don't have human reviewers, I mean, who's going to grade the MT output? They also interestingly put a list of I guess it's about 36 experts, MT and AI experts that work on this. And go check out the list. I recognize a few names. Look at that, Kenneth Hayfield, who was on the pod.
Hayfield.
Hayfield. Oh, sorry.
Don't forget.
There you go.
Yeah, I had a quick scan to see if I recognized people, but I suppose it's a slightly different network to what
There's one
we
more.
used
There's
to.
Philip Kern and Kenneth Hayfield. Those are the ones. But
Okay.
of course, head over and study the list. Well, so yeah, Meta, Facebook pouring funds, money, time, and resources into the language metaverse. We are waiting with bated breath. All right, so that's it for today's news show. Stay safe and see you next week.